All right. Hey, everybody. Dawn Zoldai here, CEO P3 Tech Consulting. Welcome back to your Dawn of Drones. We are live at the Energy Drone Robotics Coalition Summit, the 7th annual here in Houston, Texas. And what an incredible guest we have with us here today. We've got Nate Ernst from MissionGO. So Nate, say hello.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
It's been a crazy week, everybody. For those that missed our live stream yesterday on the crew, go back and check that out on the Full Crew YouTube. But let's get into MissionGO. Now, many of you probably know MissionGO because they were one of the first companies, if not, I think the first company, right?
Yep.
To deliver a live organ successfully, that was successfully transplanted into a human using a drone. And, but there's so much more to this company you may not know about. And if you recall, this month is dedicated to securing critical infrastructure, and MissionGO has a huge infrastructure mission. So Nate, first, before we get into that, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Nate Ernst, and I'm a Director of Business Development and Strategy at MissionGO. This is my 11th year in the industry. I started out in SUAS in 2013. Still actively involved, obviously, with SUAS, but I also have experience with larger UAS, about 300 to 400 pounds, as well as helicopter and airplane operations. All of my operations and experience within the industry was for and on behalf of critical infrastructure. So I joined MissionGO about 6 months ago, and happy to be part of quite literally one of the most incredible teams I've ever seen be able to use UAS not only for life-saving missions like critical cargo, but also critical infrastructure. So that's a little bit about myself.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about MissionGO's origin story.
Sure. So MissionGO was originally started for a use case, and that was to prove the concept that critical cargo, in this case, human organs, could be transported via uncrewed aircraft systems, really for the last mile delivery of organ transplants. So for anybody that's not familiar of how organ transplants work, usually, well, there is obviously a donor who is a human who donates their organ to somebody in need, right? And so the logistical process is very critical. And you have to be able to remove that organ safely, transport that organ safely to the recipient, and that has to be done in a very timely fashion. So for example, one way that could work is the organ comes out of the body and it goes into an ambulance, and that ambulance takes that organ to an airport, and it gets on an airplane or it gets on a helicopter. Every logistical process for each organ is very unique. However, in last mile delivery portions of those transports, it's very critical from a time perspective, right? And so, for example, you can have an ambulance that needs to deliver that one organ the last mile or two, and it has to drive through the inner city of a large city. Well, that could take 45 minutes. And as we've seen in Philadelphia, one of the roads just collapsed. It could take hours now. We're able to do that with SUAS for that last mile portion. And more often than not, we cut things down from 45 minutes to maybe 4.5 minutes.
That's unbelievable. And obviously that translates into so many other market sectors. And we're going to talk a lot about critical infrastructure, obviously, in this show. But before we do that, I'd love to roll this quick movie.
that go into this, right?
Yes, we've been talking about
Yes,
this
you have.
all week.
You've been doing a great job. It's really impressive. But there's a lot of stuff going on with regulation right now, and for a good reason. There's some hurdles to jump through right now until we, as a society and industry, figure this out, right? So critical cargo for us is really more on the R&D phase of that. We're hitting that from the ground floor, and we will evolve that portion of the business as regulation will allow us. But there's a second part of this from our perspective, and it is critical infrastructure. So we have taken our talents and we have diversified slightly, and we're now doing critical infrastructure primarily on the electrical utility side. Now, we will do all different types of linear infrastructure, but right now our skill set is based around electrical utilities. And so for us, we're currently very fortunate to be inspecting power lines for an electric company, and it's one of the largest contracts ever given to a drone solution provider, right? And so we're very fortunate for that.
Yeah, well, before we get into, I know we're talking about SoCal, so so surprise. Chris Cognati, the president of MissionGO, was actually on this show last November, and I think the news had just come out about you guys landing this contract. I feel like the month prior, like October. And so tell us a little bit more about that. You're right, it is one of the largest critical infrastructure contracts for a drone company.
That's correct. Yeah. So in the electrical utility world, and that's primarily where my background has come over the past decade or so, electrical utilities, they all have certain needs for critical infrastructure inspection. What's fascinating is every electrical utility has a very different need, and their needs are different, usually based on geography or climate or population density, right? So SoCal Edison, as we all are unfortunately aware, California is having some issues lately with wildfires, right? And so one of SoCal Edison's requirements is that they need to essentially harden their infrastructure to protect against future wildfires. What's one of the ways you do that? Well, you repair or you harden your existing infrastructure. Well, how do you know what to repair or harden? You have to inspect it first, right? And so MissionGO is on the SoCal Edison assets right now. We have been for the past 6 months or so, and we'll be there for the next at least 3 years, potentially longer. And we're doing right now about 60,000 structures a year for SoCal.
Yeah, 60,000. I think the final number at the end of the day might be 160,000 poles. And Nate, I think we talked about this earlier. You and I did. It was actually some component on one of these towers that actually caused a pretty large wildfire. I mean, you alluded to wildfires, but can you go into a little more detail on that? How critical this is?
So yes, I can. But first and foremost, that particular story is not about SoCal.
Well, good point. Sorry, SoCal, not about you. Okay,
but
the point is, all of the companies that have these electric towers are concerned about it, right? Absolutely. So tell us about that incident.
Sure. So let's put it this way, right? We all know critical infrastructure is aging in the United States, and we all know that it's failing, right? As population densities continue to grow, more people start to change or permanently remove themselves into a work from home environment. Different houses are going to start using more electricity, right? And different population centers, right, around the country that typically had a rural population count. Now is flooded with suburban population counts because they don't have to go into the city anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So the electric industry at a very high level is starting to rethink, what does the grid look like and what does it need to look like tomorrow versus today?
I never thought about that.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
It's really interesting, right? And so actually, fun fact, I forget, I think it was Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Over the past 3 years, they saw a 390% population increase.
Whoa.
So for a county like Susquehanna that's never had people,
right,
now is flooded,
yep,
they're running off of distribution circuits that are from the 40s.
Oh my gosh.
Right. So, you start looking at all these different things. And so not only have we known for a long time that infrastructure needs to be upgraded, if you will, the method and framework behind why an upgrade needs to happen just recently changed with COVID. Right. COVID has affected everything. So, in certain situations, like on the West Coast, where you have the Santa Ana winds, for example, or you have the El Ninos, and you have all these crazy weather events that could potentially damage a power line, right?
Right.
If the components that hold those power lines together are not robust and
Right.
they're not inspected, you're going to have an issue, and we're here to help fix that.
Wow, that's amazing. But I don't know that it was a great answer, but I don't know that it was to my question.
Oh, sorry.
I want to know, like, wasn't it, there was some component.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, you're so technical about this, but I think it's important to understand what that was,
Okay.
what happened in that incident.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was an incident, right? And
Yeah.
it was a wildfire that unfortunately was very damaging to life, property, and in the environment, right?
Yeah.
And so, for example, there's so many different components on a transmission line, high voltage or low voltage distribution.
Right.
And all of those components have a job.
Right.
One of those jobs, or one of those components rather, is called a splice, right?
Yep.
Not that anybody would necessarily drive down the highway and think about this, but have you ever thought about, okay, well, how long is that power line on that pole?
Yeah.
Because this power line goes for hundreds of miles. Well, it's not one continuous line, it's segments of lines, and they're spliced together.
Oh,
and they're
okay.
spliced together within a piece of metal called a splice, right? And so there is all of this electricity running through these lines 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And over time, whether it's weather or equipment integrity, those splices fail, right? So you have to inspect those splices. And MissionGO is taking a unique approach to doing that, but you actually measure them by measuring the resistance of the electricity that is leaking out of the splice. If too much electricity is leaking out, it's an indication that splice is going to fail, right?
Okay.
So, very long-winded way of saying,
Yeah.
in that particular incident, that particular splice was overlooked. It
Okay.
failed,
All
and
right.
those two power lines came apart and dropped to the ground.
Oh my gosh. All right. And that started that horrendous
Mhm.
incident. So, so what is the traditional way of inspecting something like a splice or these other critical components on towers in particular? Like before drones, in other words, how are people doing this?
So it was done one of two ways, and both ways are still being done today.
Okay.
You can either do it from the ground. We call that a ground-based visual inspection. That means a lineman or two will drive in through the roadway, and they'll have binoculars and a camera, and they'll look up and they'll see what they can see.
Okay.
You can automatically tell that there's some gaps there, right?
Yeah.
You can only see the bottom looking up.
Well, and how much can your human eye be trained to see anyway?
Exactly.
Accurately, yeah.
Exactly, right?
Subtle changes.
And then what happens when the power line goes off-road, right?
Oh, yeah, true,
Mhm.
right.
So option number two, which has been done for probably the past 60 years at this point, is by helicopter.
Okay, that sounds super unsafe.
Yeah, so in the helicopter world, that particular type of flying is called flying along the wire. There is a whole FAR for that, and there is a whole set of training procedures to be able to fly in that type of environment.
Okay.
But quite literally, it's as crazy as you would think.
Yeah, fly by wire. I've heard that. It is definitely a phrase that people use. Yeah.
Yep. And so you can hover in a helicopter, and it's called crabbing, and you go down the power line sideways, flying in a helicopter, and you have a camera. And now you're looking from the top down.
Okay.
That is still being done today. As regulations change, that may change as well. But drones are also another solution set to do inspections. And so that's kind of where we come in. We're, with the SoCal stuff, we're using the drone as a tool. It's a tool in our toolbox, and we're using that tool to provide the solution.
Awesome. Well, there's a whole range of services you offer in this respect. I think we've got a little visual that outlines that, but can you explain that a little bit, like what services you offer in support of critical infrastructure?
Sure. So what we like to coin or term MissionGO is not necessarily a service provider. We prefer to say solution provider. And the reason being is, let me take a step back. We're all learning. Every single one of us is learning what is happening to this industry and where this industry is going.
Right.
And one of the things that we have found is that whether it is MissionGO or it's another contractor or it's a utility that's flying internally, you collect a lot of data.
Oh, heck yeah.
A lot. So let's just do some real quick math. 160,000 poles, we're taking maybe 30 pictures per pole.
Okay.
You're talking tens of millions of photos.
Yeah, I don't do public math, by the way, so I'm not even gonna try.
So you're talking tens of millions, right?
Okay.
Now, At the end of the day, we are being compensated to provide a service.
Right.
If I go and hand you 10 million photos and say, here you go,
My head's going to explode.
your head's going to explode, and it's going to take you so long to find all of those issues
Right.
in maybe one of every 750,000 photos.
Wow.
Well, who wants to sit there and go through all of that, right?
Right.
Now, where there are some initiatives, the industry, including MissionGO, is working on things like artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Right.
However, what we're finding is on the AI side of this, when we start talking about data, algorithms aren't necessarily mature enough yet to be trusted just like a human would.
Yeah.
So for those reasons, we offer data analysis services. We will do analysis services on the data we collect or the data that other people collect.
Right.
And how do we do that? Well, we have a team of qualified electrical workers. They're called QEWs.
Mm-hmm.
There are also former linemen there and also construction engineers that have done transmission and distribution construction. They sit there and they look through this imagery. So at the end of the day, MissionGO's solution is we are going to show you all of your issues. We are going to rate them and tell you how bad those issues are, and we're going to show you exactly where they are.
All right. Excellent. Now you're doing this with more than just towers, right? There's a whole range of different structures that are considered critical infrastructure that you all are working on as well. Can you kind of walk us through some of those?
Sure, absolutely. So what we like to call this is linear infrastructure, right? Anything that is linear critical infrastructure is something that MissionGO is capable of inspecting, right? So we're really hot and heavy into the electrical utility space, which is a big deal. We're also looking at solar panels and wind turbines, right?
Did you say hot and heavy in the electrical space?
Did I?
mean, yeah, very punny. Yeah. Like I just I'm like, whoa, that just computed. Okay. All right. Sorry.
No, I didn't even think that was
okay.
So we're looking at things like wind turbines and solar panels, right? We are doing a lot of work in the renewable space, but then we're looking at some other things, right? So for example, maritime operations, and offshore is a big deal, but what about onshore, where you have freighter ships coming into ports of call, right?
Right.
And the ISR requirements, the ability to say, okay, this is that ship.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily, as a port of entry agent, need to board this ship because MissionGO's aircraft is doing the inspection of the ship as it's coming into port.
Wow, that is huge. And by the way, everybody, we obviously are live. I know you're out there. We can see you. So please jump in the chat, like say hello, tell us where you're from, ask Nate some questions, or just give him some positive encouragement. We love all of that. So I know you guys are out there and really appreciate that. Nate, I want to transition a little bit and talk about the hardware that you use, because look, we're both here at the Energy Drone Robotics Coalition Summit. We've been walking the floor. We've seen a lot of different drones, interesting drones, by the way. I'm going to put a reel out later this week with some of the cool stuff I saw at the show. So make sure you check that out on LinkedIn. But tell us about the hardware, the drones that you're actually using for these very important inspections.
Sure. So MissionGO as a solution provider needs to be flexible, right? And we need to be able to fly all different types of aircraft. For our purposes, we consider aircraft simply tools.
Yeah.
They're tools in the MissionGO toolbox. We do have the fleet of DJIs. We probably have every type of DJI that's been made in the past 5 or 6 years. But then we also are flying, blue UAS aircraft like free fly aircraft. We are flying free fly Astros. We are flying some of the other heavy lift stuff, from companies like Inspired Flight. And then we're also, in the fixed wing, VTOL fixed wing game as well.
Yep.
From our perspective, all of these different tools from all of these really good manufacturers are really, really useful for their intended purpose. Since we have a lot of intended purposes in critical infrastructure, we operate a lot of different types of aircraft.
Absolutely. And, we alluded to this, at least from the safety perspective, but could you kind of give us a high level overview of, the ROI in providing this kind of support across those range of CI or counter intel? And my brain just went military on me. Critical infrastructure sites.
Yeah. So, I think we have to look at it from an industry perspective. It used to be, at least my opinion, the past couple of years, that this ROI was all about dollars and cents, right? If you can figure out how to do this cheaper than a helicopter, for example, well, then it's obviously very valuable.
Right.
That was the main driving focus on ROI. I think as industry matures and we, again, continue to learn because we're all learning,
Yep.
right? The ROI goes much deeper than just dollar and cents. And so what I mean by that is really interesting statistic. I just verified it this morning.
Yeah.
Last year, 58 people died in helicopters flying along the wire.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah.
I hate to hear that.
And that's actually pretty low, consider the rolling average over a 10-year span.
Which is what?
Much higher than 58.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I thought you knew it.
No. I think it's somewhere in the mid 70s. It's a 10-year rolling average.
That's awful.
And so, now you start looking about things, first and foremost, human life,
Yeah.
right? The probability and expectation of a casualty from a Part 107 aircraft is very, very low, especially when you're flying in rural areas that are usually off-road, and there's a greater chance of a tree branch getting hit than a human.
Yeah, right.
So you start looking at the ROI from a human life perspective.
Yep.
You start looking at this from a liability perspective with insurance and regulation, on that side of the house. And I think the ROI is really going to be, maybe not necessarily a dollars and cents driver. Yes, it's attractive, but at the end of the day, human safety and productivity is far more important than that. So that's where I kind of think the ROI is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, efficiency, superior data, right? We know all these things, even community relations, because, I think it's less disruptive, right, than have a big cherry picker or a giant truck or whatever it is that might have to normally be inserted into these areas. By the way, everybody, Jonathan Grimm is out there saying good morning. He's a counter UAS professional working for Squarehead Technology, providing acoustic detection technology to the SAIC counter UAS program. So thank you, Jonathan, for jumping in the chat. You're the first brave soul today. And by the way, of course, this entire month is sponsored by SAIC. And we had a wonderful show last week with Billy Jackson talking about that counter UAS technology and ecosystem. So if you missed it, check that out. But I want to pivot a little bit, Nate, and talk about what's new. I saw you have this really neat new partnership with a company called Linebird. I think this might go back to your, is it Splicers?
Yep, Splicers.
Splicers.
Very
Okay,
good.
the Splice. So tell us about this partnership with Linebird, what it is, what they do, and why it's important.
So let's go back to that whole story I was talking about with a failed splice.
Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, that failed splice was missed in the inspection program. The way that has typically been done at scale is called helicopter platform work. And that is a different part of aviation. I think it's 137. If you're out there, I know you're going to correct me on it. But it's part 137, and that is platform work. And so what that is usually an MD 500 helicopter, and it has a aluminum platform on it. And the lineman is dressed in what's called a Faraday cage. It's chainmail. And
oh my gosh, like a knight?
They are exactly like a knight. And quite literally, that lineman will sit on the end of the platform in a Faraday cage, and they will actually ground themselves to the helicopter. They will fly out to a power line that's live, 230 kilovolts, 500 kilovolts. I mean, really high voltage.
So that could kill you
instantly.
Okay, instantly. Okay,
like, it would zap you totally.
Okay,
immediately.
Just stop your heart.
And because they're in a Faraday cage, they will actually touch the splice with their hands.
What?
And the electricity goes around their body in the Faraday cage and goes back into the power line.
What?
Yeah. So they were called.
That actually sounds medieval.
It was medieval, and you want to talk about a casualty rate. Aerial linemen I don't even know the number, and I'm not sure I want to know.
Oh gosh.
But aerial linemen are, God bless them. They had a hand in building this country, but it's some of the most dangerous work there is. And so anyway, going back to this whole idea of measuring splices for reliability and safety purposes.
Right.
It's done, that process with a helicopter is called hot sticking, right? And they take it, they stick, and they go out and they touch the line, they measure the resistance.
Wow.
Linebird has built that same exact tool to be suspended underneath an SUAS. And so now we can do hot sticking via an SUAS. Aside from hot sticking, there are what Linebird calls endofactor tools, and those other tools outside of hot sticks are used for aerial construction purposes that were normally done with a helicopter and an aerial lineman. For example, let's say that there is a storm and in somebody's neighborhood, 5 or 6 poles have fallen down.
Okay.
Right? The first pole is standing up, 5 or 6 poles have stood down,
Okay.
and then the last pole is standing back up.
Okay.
We can take a drone out there with a Linebird payload now, and we can go up to that first pole and we can cut the power line with the drone.
What?
And it will cut the power line, shut off the electricity to all of those live wires laying on the ground.
Right.
And then we call dead end fusing. We can put a dead end fuse with the drone back on the power line. And now everybody behind and in front of those down poles have power immediately.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's really
so
cool.
I mean, you don't really have to elaborate because the safety case, the importance of this, not only on a daily basis, but certainly in disaster response and emergencies is unbelievable. Wow, that is incredible. I want to go back and talk a little bit about the data analytics that you mentioned earlier. Now, obviously super important. You're not going to hand somebody 50 million pictures and say, over to you. You realize that back end analytics for actionable intelligence is critical. So you've really at MissionGO put an emphasis on this. And I think it was in May, if I recall correctly, right before AUVSI's Exponential, you unveiled your latest line of aviation services called the Data Analytics and Reporting. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So, one of the things that MissionGO prides themselves on is really understanding the pain points of our customers, right?
Right.
A lot of companies do a very good job at flying drones for an intended purpose.
Mm-hmm.
We really look at the why. And when we look at the why, we then define the how.
Right.
So on the electric side, we go back to this whole thing with data management and what's important and why and how to get it there.
Right.
Well, there's a whole other piece of this, right? How does the utility break down this information? Where does it go within the utility and who has access to it?
Right.
So what programs do they use? They call them GIS programs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Things like Esri.
Yep.
A lot of people use Esri.
They're here in force. Yeah.
They are here, right? And, so when we go talk to a utility, we say, okay, well, what is your breakdown for data management? Where do you want this data to go?
Mm-hmm.
In what format? And how do you want to be able to access it?
Right.
Everybody has a different answer, and that's okay because every utility is different. What we do is we figure out, okay, this is how it works with you guys. This is what we're going to do to seamlessly give you the data you need and access it when you want to.
Okay, awesome. And I think pretty obvious, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just to be thorough. Why exactly did you develop this service? In other words, you've been doing these things for a while. Was there a particular thing, or just over time you realized, hey, this needs to be part of our holistic solution?
Well, yeah. So I think, I keep saying this, and I'm going to continue to keep saying it. We're all learning, right?
Yeah.
And so what we thought was very important in the beginning of this industry still is very important, but nobody thought about the data. Nobody thought about what happens to it.
Right.
So that developed over time, and that need was developed because of what we learned in the beginning.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons we do data analysis and reporting services. And who's to say that we most undoubtedly will learn something next year? And we say, hey, we have to add that to our portfolio as well.
Yeah. Well, so many people are talking about artificial intelligence or AI, right? Just like going through these photos and maybe spotting anomalies, and that's all great. But you actually created a very specialized team for this. Tell us a little bit about why you did that, and like who these people are, essentially what skills they have.
Sure. So the people that we use for our data analysis team have direct experience, and more often than not, were the linemen in the field that originally built the power lines that we're inspecting today. So who better to be a subject matter expert on power line data in California than the people in California that built them.
Right.
That's why our team is very focused. Yes, we have a GIS team that handles all the GIS technicalities. Right. But at the end of the day, a utility is trusting MissionGO to tell them exactly where their issues are and explain how bad they are. If we're going to do that, we need the subject matter experts to work with us, and they're the ones that provide the analysis.
Okay, wow, that's awesome. So as a practical matter, how does this work? In other words, if I'm a customer, how do I engage with you? Do I Do I always get the data analytics? Is that a separate service? Does it run in parallel? Like, how does it work?
Yeah. So the answer to that is everybody's solution is different, right?
Okay, yeah, it's true.
We have some customers that come to us and say, hey, we want to do all the analysis ourselves. We have the infrastructure. We want to do it. We need somebody to fly and collect the data.
Right.
MissionGO will do that.
Right, right.
We have other customers that come to us and say, look, we need somebody to fly the data, and we also don't have the capacity to do the analysis.
Yep.
So you need to provide us a full solution.
Yes.
And then interestingly enough, I think what the industry is learning, and here's a direct example.
Yep.
Utilities are flying internally. There are a lot of great teams out there that fly directly for the utility as utility employees.
Yep, we're seeing that here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, they're collecting the same data we are, and they're ending up with tens of millions of photos. So they have all these pilots, and they spend a really good job putting together the procedures to fly, and now they say, what the heck do I do with this data?
Right, so they ship it to you.
They call MissionGO and say, hey, you guys have the data team on board. We collected the data. Will you do the analysis for us?
Yeah.
And we'll do that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm seeing kind of and some people, like, I think what you're talking about is almost like a hybrid approach, right? Where they'll have an internal program that only does so much, or maybe only does certain missions. And so are you seeing that too, Nate, where maybe sometimes even if they do have an internal program, they'll say, all right, on this particular one, we need you guys to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's very true. And really what it's coming down to more often than not is the utilities are very, very good at certain types of flight operations.
Yep.
There are other types of flight operations that are incredibly technical, right?
Yeah,
and that's what MissionGO does, right? So we come in and help them with the technical stuff. For example, pulling line with a drone, pulling new power line with drones.
Yep. No kidding. Okay, great. Well, I want to change gears completely and give you guys a huge shout out. So AUVSI, we were both there. Y'all were up on the stage. Actually, I saw Chris Crignati was up there with some of your teammates receiving the AUVSI Excellence Award in not for critical infrastructure, but in the humanitarian category. So I know that was a huge win. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So this actually goes back to the critical infrastructure. See,
yeah, it goes back to the kind of the origin story.
The origin story, right?
Here.
Exactly. Yeah. So critical cargo, right? So MissionGO had the opportunity. I believe it was in 2021, I think, right? And we had the opportunity to work with the Navajo Nation, which is actually a Native American tribe out in Arizona. And so very similar and almost directly similar to organ transports in a hospital setting with transports of organs.
Yes.
The Navajo Nation is an example of an underserved community that has issues with logistically moving things like emergency supplies.
Yes.
Right? Whether it be first aid kits, food and water, or for them, one of the things that was interesting was veterinary supplies for their cattle.
Okay.
Right?
Yep, sure.
And so they live in the middle of nowhere, Arizona, right? Out in the desert, and they don't necessarily have the roadways to get over that mountaintop.
We see this too often, Nate, honestly, on indigenous peoples, the reservations.
Yeah. So we were contacted by the Navajo Nation, and we stood up and said, yeah, you know what, we're going to demonstrate this for you guys, and we're going to show you how we can use UAS to help serve you, the Navajo Nation. So we were very privileged to work directly with them, and it was a multi-day flight with multi-day demonstrations using our UAS to transport that critical cargo, and we ended up calling that Operation Healing Feather.
That is so cool. And what I think is even cooler, Nate, is what you guys did with the award money. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So yeah, it was we were given a small award fee for being able to successfully do this for the Navajo people. And so what we did is we decided to donate it back to them.
No, I like, seriously, I get chills thinking about that. I think that's a really, really cool. So thank you for that. And congratulations. I know more awards are in your future with everything else you're doing. But speaking of the future, tell us, so much has already happened since we last spoke to Chris even. What do you project? What's out there in the future, maybe for the next year?
Sure. So I think for the next year, there's no doubt we are continuing to gain traction and presence in the electrical utility space. So we will continue to obviously work in California, but we're currently working in 23 different states now.
Wow.
So yeah, we are based in Baltimore, but it's an office that very few people go to these days. So I think there's going to be a lot of push on the critical infrastructure side with electrical utilities,
Mm-hmm.
and then also moving into some other critical infrastructure. There's a heavy emphasis on solar right now.
Right.
And then, I think you will continue to see critical cargo deliveries. But I think, and I'm going to keep it quiet for now, there
Okay.
might be some new operations coming through that are pretty interesting, and I think everyone will be excited to hear about it.
Very cool. I'm not going to keep quiet about this. For those that don't know, I worked with the Wings Over the Rockies Museum in Denver, put together a drone and eVTOL special for a 30-minute special for PBS, or the public broadcasting station for TV. And the crew went out there, talked to MissionGO, and so MissionGO is going to be featured in this. It should be released in the fall, so of course I'll let everybody know when that comes out. But I didn't have a chance to travel for that particular piece of the segment, but it was spectacular, and it gets back to this critical cargo and what you all have achieved. So make sure you guys keep an eye out for that. So excellent, excellent. Any other products, services, big announcements that you can do here? Drum roll, big reveals. Not everybody does, so no pressure.
Yeah.
But if you do, please tell it now.
Yeah, so I think Megan, our head of marketing, is on the line.
Yeah,
and,
she'll kill you if you say it.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep quiet. So,
all right.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, I understand. Not a problem. But keep watching MissionGO, everybody, because they are making things happen. Not only in critical infrastructure, which is the theme of this month, but as we talked about, this critical cargo, organ deliveries, and critical medicines and things of this nature. So you're obviously here, Nate, at the Energy Drone Robotics Coalition Summit with me. Where might we see MissionGO next, or run into you personally? Yeah.
So you'll see MissionGO next. I believe it's July 17th and
Okay.
18th in Atlanta. That is for the 7th annual Unmanned and Electrical Utility Conference.
Oh, cool.
Hosted
Interesting.
by Marcus Evans. Yeah.
Okay.
So that will be in downtown Atlanta. And then the next time you'll see MissionGO after that will be at Commercial UAV Expo in Las Vegas.
Woohoo.
And we will have a booth there.
All right. I'm so excited. And by the way, everybody, just pitching it now. Make sure you're coming a little early on Labor Day. We're going to have our 3rd annual Flash Mob Networking Happy Hour somewhere. Follow me on LinkedIn. Keep an eye out. Be working with Titan Aviation and Tony Drummond and a handful of other companies who will be sponsoring that. So hopefully we can get you some free drinks and food, but we shall see. So that's going to be awesome. I love Vegas, and I love that event. It's going to be so super fun. So just a couple minutes left. Tell us, Nate, anything you want to close out this episode, anything we missed, anything you really want to leave the audience with.
Yeah, I think, I really appreciate the questions, Dawn. I think I did a pretty good job at explaining about who we are.
You did.
Yeah.
Pat you on the back there, right there. See, I can do that because we're live.
I think, MissionGO is, in a lot of respects, paving the additional way of the industry, right? We're taking lessons learned over the previous years and moving forward, right? So, as you start to see, things change with regulation and things change with, companies and who's working with who, one of the focuses that I see, moving forward is, while we're waiting for regulation, it's really important to, work together as an industry, right? And to work with different organizations and figure out how to do strategic collaborations. We're really, really good at certain things. We're not a jack of all trades, right? So, I think that's one of the things that, I'd like to touch on, that MissionGO is, actively, working on with things like Linebird.
Right.
That's really who we are. And that's, what we're all about.
Yeah. There was a question that you talked about Linebird, and we do have 2 minutes, so I'm just going to go ask it because I love when folks ask us questions. I want to respect that. The question was, is the Linebird line staking capability being integrated with Skydio platforms?
Okay.
And is it being used in North Carolina, if so?
Sure. So, yeah, very good question. So the Linebird system, that's about a 12-pound payload.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, heck, they're usually wearing chainmail
Yeah,
and holding big things to
Yeah. So that's in the 107 world, that would be considered a heavy lift, right?
Okay, yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So typically that's being used with inspired flight aircraft, the IF 1200A.
Okay, got it. All right. Excellent question out there. Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you, everybody. I know there was a bunch of you out there, especially on my LinkedIn today. Appreciate you all. All right. I think that's all she wrote, unless there's anything. Oh, how can they reach you, Nate, if they have more questions like Jonathan just had, or they want to learn more about MissionGO?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the best way to do that is www.missiongo.io,
Okay.
not .com.io.
Okay.
And there is a contact us section there. It's monitored by a bunch of us at MissionGO, including myself. So that's the best way to get us is through the website.
And by the way, there is excellent things up on that website, white papers and whatnot, all kinds of use cases. So check out the website if you haven't checked it out lately. Oh, okay. 1 minute left,
Sure.
and one more question that I
Sure.
missed, and I apologize. Chris Genesis is one of our super fans,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'd be remiss not to ask this for Chris.
Absolutely.
Because actually, by the way, Chris, Maggie did cover this on Clubhouse last Thursday. That replay is also available, everybody. It was a great show. What certification should a potential employee of MissionGO seek out?
Cool. Well, shout out to Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining in, sir.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Yeah. So MissionGO, that's very important, and I will close with this. We are actively hiring.
Well, you heard it here.
Actively
Okay.
hiring. There's my announcement.
Okay. There's your announcement.
Yeah, so we are actively hiring. We are actively looking for RPICs, and we're also looking for visual observers, right? And so, we do expect you to have your 107. However, MissionGO has probably one of the most robust training programs I've ever seen. And so we will bring you in, assuming you have your 107 and you are competent and ready to get to work. We will also train you how to fly through our processes and get you in the field yesterday.
All right. And then I know there's nuanced, you need lineman background if you're going to be one of these data analysts, but please connect with Nate offline if you're interested in working for MissionGO. It'll be an amazing company to work for. Obviously, you get to work with a guy like this, and nothing better there. So I think we're at the end here, awesome. Nate. So thank you so much. Everybody, thank you out there. We are out here in Houston.
Take care, everybody.